How you doing, everybody? I'm ABC Action News Chief Meteorologist Dennis Phillips, and welcome to the folks at the Seminole Hurricane Expo. So we're going to talk a little bit about the upcoming season, about projections, about long-range projections, and what to expect. So first of all, here are the names of the 2023 hurricane season in the Atlantic, starting with Arlene. We go to Brett, Cindy, Dawn, Emily, Franklin, all the way down to Whitney. Now remember, in the past, we've actually gone to the Greek alphabet every now and again, but this year, we feel pretty confident it will be more of a quiet season in terms of overall development than previous years, but that does not mean we're not going to see storms that can get unusually strong. Whether or not you are someone who believes in climate change or believes that there's a direct relationship between a warming climate and the number of storms that forms, that can be debated. What I don't think can be debated is the fact that storms are getting stronger the last 10 years or so as they go over much warmer water. So I would be inclined to say you're not going to see necessarily a direct relationship between a potential changing climate and the number of storms that form, but I do believe you will see a relationship between how strong those storms get. But bottom line, this is an El Nino year coming. And historically, when we get an El Nino year, that means there are fewer storms that develop in the Atlantic. And when you look at an overall season, typically June is a very quiet month. Things that do develop usually in the Gulf. July, about the same. Typically, you do not get a lot of development the first couple of months, but then once you get into July and into August, historically, the peak of the hurricane season is September 10th. Now, I want you to notice something. So that's, again, Atlantic hurricanes, right? But then it starts to drop once you get to October, but all of a sudden you get a little bit of an uptick right there toward the mid to latter half of October. That is the time us in the Bay Area are actually every bit as much vulnerable as any other place. Matter of fact, the last major hurricane to hit us here in the Bay Area, 1921. And it was right there, because what happens is the Atlantic, once you hit October, is pretty much cut off with development. Now, again, you can argue, as the water may be warming some, that season may extend a little bit longer. But historically, most of the action is in the Caribbean. Well, think about that, right? So you get a storm coming up from the Caribbean. Let's say it misses Cuba on the right, misses the Yucatan on the left, and splits the difference and goes up into the Gulf, right? Well, hurricanes want to go north. They're drawn northward. They don't turn without a reason for turning. So what might cause a storm to turn toward our area? Well, that would be a front, a cold front that would turn something into the western side of the state. How many cold fronts do we get in June, July, August, the first half of September? Not too many, right? But once you get into October, you could see a storm go and curve more into Florida, and that is why you get that uptick right there, historically at least. So let's talk about the wind scale, all right? In terms of a Category 1 hurricane, winds 74 to 95 miles an hour, you typically don't see a lot of structural damage. Now, in our area, by the way, with Ian and with Irma, we had strong tropical storm force winds, minimal Cat 1 winds. You don't see structural damage, but you see pool enclosures that get messed up. You see trees that can go down. We have all those pine trees around, and those can fall in a house and do structural damage. But you typically don't get damage to the structure just from the wind. So then we go to Category 2. That's winds of 96 to 110 miles an hour. Again, typically you don't see structural damage, but you do have more trees that go down, and you do have more flying debris. And then, of course, the surge issue is another story entirely, and we'll touch on that in just a minute. And then we go from a Category 2 hurricane to a Category 3, or a major hurricane. Cat 3 or higher is considered a major hurricane, and that is when, by definition, you get devastating damage. That's the scale from the Hurricane Center, winds of 111 to 129. This is when you start to get structural damage. And then Category 4, the verbiage goes to catastrophic damage with Cat 4, obviously structural damage. And then Cat 5 is the extreme. It's as high as the scale goes, with catastrophic damage and winds greater than 157 miles an hour. But that talks a lot about wind. What about water? And that in our area is as big a concern, if not bigger concern than anything else. Because the old adage goes, we hide from the wind, we run from the water, right? And storm surge is obviously the biggest issue for folks, whether it's Seminole, any other place along the coast in Pinellas or in the entire Bay Area, because not only with a storm surge do you have water rise, but this is something a lot of folks don't understand or they don't realize. It isn't just water rise. It's the waves on top of the water rise. So when we're talking about a 10 to 12 foot storm surge, in this case, where the water rise goes, you then have waves on top of that storm surge, which is why parts of Fort Myers Beach were just absolutely devastated by Ian with the surge, because it wasn't just the water, it was also the waves on top of the water as it came on shore. So it's so important to know your evacuation zones, because usually people don't evacuate for the wind, but you do for the water. Because if water comes in on you with inundation, there's absolutely nothing you can do to escape. The winds, you can hunker down. The water, not so much. And in reality, this in Pinellas County is by far the biggest concern for us. So again, hopefully this answered a few questions for you. As always, we will be online and on air 24/7 during hurricane season on abcactionnews.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Denis Phillips, WFTS, or just look for this picture here. I'll be around there somewhere. Usually we don't get a lot of sleep during hurricane season. I know you don't either, which is why we're there for you 24/7 to help keep you and your family safe. Thanks for stopping by. You guys have a great and a safe hurricane season.